In the Reed family, you could be charismatic or you could be competent, but never both. When my brother introduced his fiancée, a journalist famous for ruining careers, he didn't brag, he joked she was too accomplished. A beautiful burden he was saintly enough to manage. The table laughed. But Arden didn't. She was watching me, and for the first time in 32 years, I felt seen and absolutely terrified. There is a specific kind of silence that costs money. It is not the silence of an empty room or the silence of a library. It is the silence of a problem being strangled before it can learn to scream. That was my product. My clients did not pay me for creativity. They did not pay me for headlines. They paid me to walk into a chaotic, over-leveraged startup, identify the regulatory landmine buried under the free kombucha tap and the equity projections, and disarm it without waking the neighbors. My consultancy was small. It did not have a logo on the door. We operated out of a converted warehouse space in the financial district of the city, a space that smelled faintly of roasted coffee and expensive toner. I liked it that way. At 32, I had learned that visibility was a tax I was unwilling to pay. Visibility meant questions. Visibility meant having to explain why I, a woman with a degree in forensic accounting and a memory like a steel trap, had left a prestigious track at a major firm to clean up messes for tech bro CEOs who thought compliance was a suggestion. The betrayal that had sent me here was 5 years old, but it still throbbed when it rained. I had been the scapegoat for a senior partner's negligence. I had saved the firm, and they had thanked me by suggesting I take a sabbatical while they erased my name from the win. I learned then that being the hero is dangerous. Being the janitor is safe. The janitor has keys to every room, and nobody looks at them twice. I checked the time on my phone. 6 o'clock on a Friday. I had promised my mother I would be in Larkhaven by 7. My brother, Caleb, was bringing his new fiancée to dinner. Caleb was 3 years older than me. He was the kind of man who walked into a room and instantly convinced everyone that the party had been waiting for him to start. He was charming in a way that felt like a warm blanket. Until you realized it was actually a net. He worked in venture capital, a job that involved a lot of shaking hands and repeating buzzwords until they sounded like philosophy. Our parents adored him. To them, Caleb was the sun, and I was just one of the colder planets orbiting at a respectful distance. I shut down my laptop. The drive to Larkhaven took 45 minutes, enough time to armor myself. I practiced my lines. Yes, work is fine. No, I am not seeing anyone. Yes, Caleb looks wonderful. It was a script I had memorized a decade ago. The house in Larkhaven was a sprawling colonial that my parents had bought when Caleb won his first debate championship. It was a house built for accolades. The mantel was crowded with Caleb's trophies, Caleb's diplomas, photographs of Caleb shaking hands with local politicians. There was one photo of me, tucked in the corner, from my college graduation. The sun glare on the glass obscured my face. When I walked in, the air smelled of rosemary and expensive perfume. My mother was in the kitchen, frantically arranging garnish on a platter of lamb. "Genesis, you are late," she said without turning around. "I am right on time. Mom," she wiped her hands on a towel. "Caleb is in the living room. Go say hello, and try to look pleasant. This girl is important." I had heard about Arden Vale. Everyone had. She was an investigative journalist who had just won the Pemberton Prize for a series exposing corruption in the pharmaceutical supply chain. She was known for being relentless, brilliant, and terrifyingly articulate. The idea of Caleb, who panicked if he had to read a contract longer than 3 pages. Marrying a woman who hunted lies for a living seemed like a clerical error in the universe. I found them in the living room. Caleb was holding a glass of scotch, leaning against the fireplace as if posing for a portrait. Arden Vale was sitting on the sofa. She was smaller than she looked on television, with sharp features and eyes that were a startling, clear gray. She was not looking at Caleb. She was looking at the bookshelves, scanning the titles with the efficiency of a scanner. Caleb saw me and grinned. The grin did not reach his eyes. "Genesis, finally, I want you to meet Arden." Arden stood up. Her handshake was firm, dry, and brief. "It is nice to meet you." "Genesis," she said. Her voice was low, devoid of the performative cheerfulness my mother preferred. "You too," I said. "Congratulations on the Pemberton." The series was incredible. Arden tilted her head slightly. "You read it?" "I read everything," I said. Caleb laughed, a loud, booming sound that filled the room. "Genesis reads fine print for fun. She is the family actuary. I am a risk consultant." "Caleb," I said, my voice steady. "Same thing," he said, waving his hand. "Come on, let's eat. Mom is going to have a stroke if the lamb gets cold." Dinner was a performance. My father sat at the head of the table, carving the meat with surgical precision. Caleb sat to his right, Arden next to him. I was across from them, in the seat that faced the window. It was raining outside, the drops drumming a nervous rhythm against the glass. "So, Arden," my father said, beaming, "we were just telling our friends that Caleb managed to snag a celebrity, a Pemberton winner in the family. We are going to have to upgrade our subscription to the Times." Caleb chuckled and placed his hand over Arden's. She didn't pull away, but I saw the muscles in her forearm tense. "It is a lot of pressure. Dad, look at her. She is brilliant. Too accomplished. Really. I told her yesterday she's going to make me look small." He looked around the table, inviting the laughter. It was his signature move, deprecating himself just enough to fish for a compliment, while subtly framing his partner's success as a lovable inconvenience. My mother laughed on cue. "Oh, stop it. Caleb, you are doing just fine. You are executive track." My father joined in. "A power couple. That is what you are. Although, Arden, you might have to slow down a bit if you want to keep up with this one. Caleb has been moving mountains at the firm." The table laughed. It was a warm, communal sound, the sound of a family agreeing on a shared reality. I smiled tightly, looking down at my plate. Then I noticed Arden. She was not laughing. She was holding her fork, perfectly still, her eyes fixed on Caleb's profile. It was not a look of adoration. It was the look a biologist gives a specimen in a petri dish. Then, slowly, her gaze shifted across the table and locked onto me. The laughter died down. Arden cleared her throat. "Genesis," she said. I looked up, startled. "Yes, I was reading about the new regulatory framework for fintech startups in the Journal last week," she said, "the piece about algorithmic bias in lending platforms. It mentioned a consultancy that helped rewrite the internal compliance structures for 3 of the major apps before the audit hit. The article didn't name the firm, but the methodology sounded incredibly specific. It prioritized risk mitigation over growth velocity. That was you, wasn't it?" The silence that followed was absolute. My fork hovered halfway to my mouth. My parents looked confused. Caleb looked annoyed. I hesitated. "That is not public information," I said carefully. Arden smiled. It was a small, sharp smile. "I know. That is why I'm asking." The syntax of the solution was unique. Most consultants would have suggested a patch. Whoever did that work rebuilt the foundation. It was elegant. I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck. It was the first time in 10 years that anyone at this table had asked me a question about my work that wasn't condescending. "Yes," I said. "We handled the restructuring." Caleb cleared his throat loudly. "Well, Genesis does a lot of boring computer stuff. Very technical. But Arden, tell Dad about the gala. They are honoring you next month." Right, Arden did not look away from me. She held my gaze for 1 second longer than was polite. A silent acknowledgement passed between us like a note under a door. Then she turned back to Caleb, her expression smoothing into a polite mask. "Yes," she said, "the gala. It should be fun." The rest of the dinner blurred. I went through the motions, nodding and smiling, but my mind was racing. How did she know that project had been shielded by 3 layers of non-disclosure agreements? My name was nowhere near the paperwork. As I was leaving, Caleb walked me to my car. The rain had stopped, leaving the driveway slick and black. "She is intense, isn't she?" he asked, leaning against my door. "She is smart." I said, "Yeah, well, smart is good, but she can be a lot." I think she is just nervous about meeting the family. She tends to overcompensate with the intellectual stuff when she is insecure. I looked at him, my brother, the golden boy, rewriting the narrative in real time. He genuinely believed that Arden's intelligence was a defense mechanism, rather than her defining feature. He believed that he was the prize, and she was lucky to be in his orbit. She seems fine to me. Caleb, I said. He shrugged. Just do me a favor. Do not encourage the work talk. I want her to relax. She works too hard. She needs to learn to just be. Code for be quiet and look pretty. I drove home in silence, the radio off. The question Arden had asked kept replaying in my mind. She had seen the work. She had recognized the signature. For years, I had told myself that I wanted to be invisible. I told myself that safety lay in the shadows. But as I merged onto the highway, watching the city lights blur into streaks of white and red, I realized that I was hungry. I was starving for someone to know what I actually did. The email arrived the next morning at 10 o'clock. I was at my desk, reviewing a forensic audit for a client who had accidentally embezzled $200,000 from his own company. The subject line was simple interview request. Foresight. I opened it, expecting spam. Dear Ms. Reed, I am currently curating the annual Foresight 30 Under feature. Unlike previous years, this cycle is focusing on individuals who operate under the radar, the architects, the fixers, and the strategists who build the systems others claim credit for. Your name has come up in my research. I would like to include you in the profile. Best, Arden Vale. I stared at the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs. Foresight was not just a blog. It was the industry standard for identifying power players before they became household names. Being featured was a coronation. My first instinct was panic. If I did this, the anonymity I had carefully constructed would shatter. My clients trusted me because I was a ghost. Ghosts do not give interviews. I hit reply. Dear Arden, thank you for the offer. However, I make it a practice not to discuss my work publicly due to the sensitive nature of my client contracts. I am sure you understand. Best of luck with the piece. Genesis. I pressed send and exhaled. It was the safe choice, the smart choice. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number, then a voice note. I hesitated, then pressed play. Arden's voice filled the quiet office. It sounded different than it had at dinner, less polite, more commanding. Genesis. I just got your email. I figured you would say no. That is exactly why I want to profile you. But before you close the door, I want you to know that I am not just looking at the fintech restructuring. I know about the Marston case. I know you were the one who found the irregularities in the supply chain audits. And I know your firm erased you from the final report to protect the senior partner. I have the draft logs. I'm not looking to expose you. I am looking to give you the credit you paid for with your career. Meet me for coffee. Off the record to start. Just 10 minutes. The message ended. I sat frozen. The Marston case. That was the betrayal. That was the reason I had left the big firm. It was a closed file, sealed by settlements and threats that would make a grown man weep. If Arden had draft logs, she had access to something deep inside the firm's archives. She wasn't asking for an interview. She was offering a trade. My hands were shaking as I typed a reply to the text. Where and when, the grind on 4th. Tomorrow, 8 in the morning. She replied instantly. I put the phone down and walked to the window. The city stretched out below me, a grid of steel and ambition. I had spent 5 years building a fortress of silence. In less than 24 hours, my brother's fiancée had found the one loose brick and pulled it out. Later that afternoon, Caleb stopped by my office. He rarely visited. He said my office was depressing and that the lack of windows in the conference room gave him hives. But at 3 o'clock, he breezed in, wearing a suit that cost more than my car. Hey, Jenna, he said, sitting on the edge of my desk. I was in the neighborhood. Thought I would buy my little sister a coffee. I am busy. Caleb, I said, not looking up from my monitor. Always busy. You need to live a little. He picked up a stress ball from my desk and squeezed it. So, what are you working on? Anything interesting? Just standard compliance reviews. Who for? I stopped typing. Caleb, you know I can't tell you that. Right. Secret agent stuff. He laughed, but his eyes were scanning my desk. They lingered on a stack of files I had marked urgent. Are you working with any of the big VC firms? I heard rumors that Horizon was looking for outside counsel on risk. I looked at him sharply. Why do you ask? Just curiosity. Networking. You know how it is. If you are working with Horizon, you should tell me. I could put in a good word. I am not working with Horizon. He dropped the stress ball. Good. They are a mess anyway. Hey, did Arden reach out to you? My stomach tightened. No, I lied. Why would she? She mentioned she might send you a link to her article or something. She is on a tear lately. Just ignore her if she gets annoying. She thinks everyone is a source. He stood up, brushing lint off his trousers. Anyway, Mom wants to know if you are coming to the engagement party next week. She is stressing about the guest list. I will be there. I said, Great. Wear something colorful. Okay. You always dress like you are going to a funeral. He walked to the door, then paused. You know I am proud of you. Right, Jen. Even if I don't understand what you do, I watched him leave. The door clicked shut. Even if I don't understand what you do. He understood. He understood enough to ask about Horizon. He understood enough to warn me about Arden. Caleb wasn't stupid. He was just selectively observant. He only saw things that could help him or hurt him. And right now, he was trying to figure out which category I fell into. I left the office early. I needed to clear my head. I drove to my parents' house, telling myself I needed to pick up a casserole dish I had left there weeks ago. It was a flimsy excuse, but I wanted to see them. I wanted to see the people who had raised us, to look for clues I might have missed. The house was quiet. My father was still at work. My mother was in the sunroom, on the phone. She didn't hear me come in. I stood in the hallway, listening. Oh, Linda, you know how it is. She was saying, Caleb is just swamped. He's practically running the division now. They are grooming him for the C-suite. We are so proud. A pause. Genesis. Oh, she is fine. She is still doing her computer thing, you know, tech support for startups. It keeps the lights on. But we are really hoping she meets someone at the wedding. She is so solitary. It worries me. I stepped back, the floorboard creaking under my foot. My mother turned, her eyes widening. Genesis. I didn't hear you. I gotta go. Mom, I said, my voice hollow. I turned and walked out. Tech support. Keeps the lights on. I ran a firm that protected millions of dollars in assets. I had saved companies from federal indictments. I had a reputation that commanded fees higher than my father's annual salary. And to them, I was the help. I was the difficult sister who fixed computers and couldn't find a husband. I sat in my car in the driveway, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. It wasn't just that they didn't know. It was that they had actively chosen a story that made them comfortable. A story where Caleb was the star, and I was the supporting character with no lines. If I was successful, if I was powerful, it disrupted the balance. It made Caleb look less extraordinary, and my family would sacrifice anything to keep Caleb extraordinary. I looked at my phone. The text message from Arden was still open. The grind on 4th. Tomorrow, 8 in the morning. I had been afraid that talking to Arden would betray my family. But as I looked at the house, with its manicured lawn and its trophies on the mantel, I realized the betrayal had already happened. It had been happening every day for 32 years. They had edited me out of my own life. I started the car. Tomorrow, I was going to put myself back in. The grind on 4th was one of those coffee shops that took itself too seriously. Everything was reclaimed wood and exposed brick. The baristas wore leather aprons. It was the kind of place where people made deals that destroyed neighborhoods while drinking $6 lattes. Arden was sitting in a booth at the back, facing the door. She was wearing a trench coat and reading a physical newspaper. When she saw me, she folded the paper and set it aside. You came, she said. I sat down. I didn't order anything. You have 5 minutes, I said. Tell me about the logs. Arden leaned forward. Her eyes were intense, devoid of the social pleasantries she had worn at dinner. The Marston case, she said. 5 years ago, a mid-sized equity firm was accused of inflating asset values to secure a line of credit from a federal bank. The investigation was internal. The firm hired a team to audit the books before the SEC got involved. You were the lead associate on that team. I said nothing. You found the inflation. Arden continued. It was clever. They were capitalizing operating expenses as long-term assets. You flagged it. You wrote a memo detailing the fraud and recommending immediate disclosure. She paused. Watching my face, that memo disappeared. Genesis. The final report said the errors were clerical. The firm paid a small fine and moved on. 3 weeks later, the partner you reported to was promoted, and you were quietly let go with a severance package that I assume came with a very heavy NDA. I kept my face blank. You are guessing. I am not guessing. I have the memo. She reached into her bag and pulled out a photocopy. She slid it across the table. I looked down. It was my handwriting in the margins. It was my syntax. It was the document that had ruined my life. Where did you get this? I whispered. I have sources, Arden said. But here's the part you don't know. The partner didn't bury this alone. He had help. Someone tipped him off that you were digging. Someone outside the firm. But with enough connection to the industry to know that a scandal would hurt the market, I looked up. Who? Arden hesitated. That is what I am trying to confirm. But Genesis, listen to me. Foresight, 30 under, isn't just a list. It is an argument. I want to argue that the real power in this city isn't the people giving the speeches. It is the people who know where the bodies are buried. You are the ultimate example. You have been cleaning up messes for people who treat you like furniture. She leaned in closer. Your brother talks about you like you are a broken toy he has to tolerate. Your parents talk about you like you are a disappointment. But I look at this memo, and I see the smartest person in the room. I want to write that story. I want to put your name on the map in a way they can't ignore. Why, I asked. Why do you care? You are marrying into this family. Arden's expression flickered. A shadow passed over her face. Because I hate waste, she said quietly. And Genesis, you are being wasted. I looked at the memo again. I remembered the night I wrote it. I remembered the feeling of certainty, the belief that the truth mattered. I remembered the crushing weight of the silence that followed. If I do this, I said, if I go on the record, it has to be about the work. No family gossip, no hit pieces on my brother. Arden nodded. Strictly professional. We focus on your methodology, your ethics, your impact. The Marston case is just context for your resilience. And I want approval on quotes. Standard practice for technical profiles. She agreed. I took a deep breath. The air in the coffee shop smelled of roasted beans and ambition. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was hiding. Okay, I said. Arden smiled. It was a genuine smile this time. Okay, let's start with the beginning. Tell me why you started your own firm. I began to talk. I talked about the philosophy of risk. I talked about the architecture of compliance. I talked about the satisfaction of finding the flaw in the system and fixing it. As I spoke, I saw Arden taking notes. She wrote quickly, her pen scratching against the paper. She was listening. She was really listening. But in the back of my mind, a warning bell was ringing. Someone tipped him off that you were digging. Arden had said someone outside the firm. Someone connected. My mind flashed to Caleb. 5 years ago. Caleb had just started his job at the venture capital firm. He was desperate to prove himself. He had asked me questions then. 2 questions about my work. Questions about the Marston audit. So, Jenna, how is the big case going? Find anything juicy, I had told him. I had trusted him. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. It was heavier than the coffee. Heavier than the fear. Caleb had been the one to ask me about the Marston case over dinner 5 years ago, and 2 days later, the partner knew exactly where to look to destroy my evidence. I looked at Arden. She was writing. Her head bent. Did she know? Was that why she was here? Was she investigating the corruption? Or was she investigating the man she was about to marry? I didn't ask. I kept talking about risk frameworks and regulatory shields, but under the table, my hand was clenched into a fist. If Caleb had sold me out to climb his own ladder, then the family narrative wasn't just a lie, it was a weapon, and I was done standing in front of the barrel. Let's talk about the future, Arden said, looking up. Where do you see your firm in 5 years? I looked at her, and then I looked through the window at the street outside. Visible, I said. I see it being visible. Arden wrote it down. Visible. It was a dangerous word. But as I said it, I felt a strange sense of calm. I had spent my life protecting the peace, but peace, I was realizing, was just another word for submission. I was ready for war. I just hoped I survived the first battle. Arden closed her notebook. Thank you. Genesis, this is going to be good. She stood up to leave. By the way, she said, pausing, your brother asked me this morning if I was meeting you. He seemed anxious. What did you tell him? I asked. I told him I was going to yoga, she said. She winked. I am not the only one who can keep secrets. She walked out into the sunlight. I sat in the booth for a long time. I watched the people come and go. I watched the city wake up. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Caleb. Hey, just checking in. You didn't do anything stupid today, right? I looked at the message. I looked at the stupid flickering on the screen. I typed back, just working. Caleb. Same as always. I pressed send. The lie tasted sweet. It tasted like leverage. I picked up the photocopy of the memo Arden had left on the table. I folded it carefully and put it in my purse. The game had started. And this time, I knew the rules. The coffee in my cup had gone cold. But neither Arden nor I had taken a sip in 20 minutes. We were sitting in a booth at the back of a place called the Archives, a dimly lit cafe in the University District where the baristas were too busy discussing philosophy to notice who was sitting in their corners. It was the kind of place I usually avoided, too earnest, too loud, but Arden had chosen it for the acoustics. No one could hear us over the espresso machine. Arden had a way of looking at you that made you feel like a manuscript she was editing. She didn't just listen to the words, she listened to the white space between them. You keep using the word useful, Arden said. She tapped her pen against her notebook. You have said it 4 times. You want to be useful. You wanted the audit to be useful. You wanted your silence to be useful. I shifted in my seat. It is a pragmatic word. It is a diminished word. She countered. It is the word people use when they are afraid to take up space. I looked at her. I was not used to this. My clients usually asked me about liability caps and indemnity clauses. They did not ask me about the architecture of my self-worth. Foresight, 30. Under isn't about age. Genesis, she said, leaning forward. Her voice was low, cutting through the noise of the cafe. I know the title is misleading. It is marketing, but the actual list. It is about 30 people who are operating under the radar. People who are the engine in a car everyone else is just driving. You qualify not because you are 32, but because you are the only reason half these startups in the city haven't collapsed under the weight of their own negligence. She flipped a page in her notebook. Let's talk about the difficult label. I stiffened. Who told you I was difficult? Arden raised an eyebrow. Everyone. It is the first word that comes up when I run your name through the back channels. Genesis Reed is brilliant, but difficult. Genesis Reed is thorough, but rigid. In corporate folklore, difficult is code for a woman who points out a problem that a man created. I looked down at my hands. They were clenched in my lap. The Marston case, I said quietly. That was where it started. After I found the fraud. After I wrote the memo you have in your bag. The senior partners didn't just fire me. They had to discredit me. If I was just a whistleblower, I was a threat. But if I was hysterical, if I was hard to work with, then I was just a liability. They had to cut loose. Arden wrote something down. She didn't look up. They made you the problem so they could ignore the crime, she said. Precisely. And you let them. I didn't let them do anything. I snapped. Surprised by the sudden flare of anger in my chest, I survived. I took my severance, I signed their papers, and I built a firm where I answered to no one. I chose safety. Safety is expensive, Arden said. She looked up, her gray eyes piercing. It cost you your name. She took a sip of her cold coffee, her gaze drifting toward the window. You know, she said, her tone shifting, becoming almost conversational. I was at the Innovator Summit last month. Your brother was the keynote speaker for the breakout session on ethical leadership. I felt a familiar tightening in my stomach at the mention of Caleb. He is very charismatic on stage. He is, Arden agreed. He was talking about corporate governance. He used a very interesting phrase. He called it the structural integrity of invisible systems. He said that true leadership is about honoring the basement, not just the balcony. My blood ran cold. I stared at her. What did you say? He said we have to honor the basement, Arden repeated, watching me closely. He had this whole slide deck about it. He talked about how risk is just truth waiting to be acknowledged. The crowd loved it. They gave him a standing ovation. I felt like the room was tilting. Those were my words, not just similar concepts, my exact words. I had written that phrase in a presentation deck I had sent to Caleb 3 years ago, asking for his feedback before I pitched a new client. He had told me it was too dry. He had told me it sounded like an academic paper and that I should spice it up. He had told me to delete it, and then he had walked onto a stage and sold it as his own philosophy. Genesis, Arden asked softly. I picked up my water glass. My hand was shaking. Just a little. That is a catchy phrase, I said, my voice tight. Arden didn't push. She didn't have to. She saw the recognition in my face. She saw the sudden, sharp realization that my brother wasn't just overshadowing me. He was strip-mining me. She closed her notebook. You know, she said, her voice dropping to a murmur. People think I am lucky. They tell me every day how wonderful Caleb is, how supportive, how he is the perfect partner for a woman like me. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her composure. He introduces me as his prize, she said. He jokes that I am too accomplished because it makes him look magnanimous, like he is secure enough to handle me. But Genesis, I listened to him talk about my work, and it sounds like he is describing a pet that learned a difficult trick. He is not proud of me. He is tolerating me. And I'm starting to wonder if he is waiting for me to fail so he can finally be the big one in the room again. I sat there, stunned. My family thought Arden was the queen. They thought she was the son that Caleb had managed to capture. But here she was, sitting in a dark cafe with the difficult sister, admitting that she felt small. He likes to be the protagonist, I said carefully. Arden laughed, a dry, humorless sound. He doesn't just want to be the protagonist. He wants to be the narrator. He wants to write the lines for everyone else. She reached across the table and touched my hand. Her skin was cool. I am not mapping the ecosystem to hurt him. Genesis, I am mapping it because I need to know who I am actually marrying. And right now, the only person in this family who feels real to me is you. I left the cafe feeling like I had walked out of a centrifuge. My equilibrium was gone. I drove back to my office in a daze. The city moved around me, buses, pedestrians, the relentless churn of commerce. But my mind was stuck on that phrase, the structural integrity of invisible systems. He had stolen it. He had looked me in the eye, told me it was bad writing, and then he had memorized it. When I got to my desk, the red light on my office phone was blinking. I sat down and pressed the button. Ms. Reed, this is Elias Thorne's office at Aurelius Capital. Mr. Thorne would like to speak with you regarding a sensitive matter. Please return the call at your earliest convenience. I froze. Aurelius Capital was not a startup. It was an institution. It was a fictional venture firm that handled billions of dollars in assets. Elias Thorne was a legend in the city, a recluse, a kingmaker, and a man known for ruthless efficiency. I dialed the number. My hands were steady now. Rage had a way of steadying the nerves. This is Genesis Reed, I said when the assistant answered. One moment, Ms. Reed. The line clicked, and a deep, gravelly voice came on. "Ms. Reed, thank you for calling back." "Mr. Thorne," I said, "how can I help you? I have heard you are the person to call when a house is burning down, but the owners want to pretend it is just a barbecue." He said. I paused. I prefer to think of myself as a risk mitigation specialist. Semantics. Thorne said, "Listen, I have a situation. Aurelius is looking to overhaul its internal integrity protocols. We are about to go through a massive merger, and I need someone to clean the pipes. I don't want a Big Four accounting firm. They leak. I want someone who knows how to find the rot and cut it out without killing the patient." "Why me?" I asked. "Because I did my homework," he said. "I know what happened at Marston. I know you took the fall for a partner who is now golfing in Florida. I need that kind of loyalty, but I also need that kind of competence. It is not loyalty." "Mr. Thorne," I said sharply, "it was a non-disclosure agreement. Even better. That means you respect a contract." He named a fee. It was an obscene amount of money. It was enough money to buy a new office. It was enough money to buy freedom. But there is a catch. He added, "This role is public. You would be the chief compliance officer for the transition. Your name would be on the press release. You would be the face of our new ethical standard. Visible." He was offering me visibility. If I took this, I would be out of the shadows. I would be a player. And if Caleb was the ethical face of his firm, and I was the ethical face of Aurelius, we would be peers. I need 24 hours to consider it. I said, "You have 12. Thorne replied. "I like people who make decisions." I hung up the phone. My heart was pounding. This was it. This was the career-defining opportunity, but it felt dangerous. Aurelius was known for its Shark Tank culture. If I went in there and failed, if I missed something, the fall would be public. There would be no hiding this time. But then I thought of Caleb standing on a stage, using my words to get a standing ovation. I opened my laptop. I needed to see him, but before I did, I needed to arm myself. Arden had said that someone in Caleb's network had helped discredit me 5 years ago. She said the timeline overlapped with his first big career leap. I logged into my old cloud storage account. I hadn't looked at these files in years. They were a graveyard of my 20s old resumes, tax returns, and a folder simply labeled Backup. I opened the Backup folder. Inside were thousands of emails I had archived before I was locked out of the Marston server. I had saved them instinctively, a reflex of a paranoid mind. I searched for my brother's name. Hundreds of results, mostly forwarded jokes, family logistics, and questions about what to get Mom for her birthday. Then I searched for the name of the senior partner who had fired me. Robert Vane. Nothing. I sat back, chewing my lip. Think. Who was Caleb's mentor back then? Who was the man who had hired him, Julian Banks? I searched for Julian Banks. One email popped up. It was dated 2 days after I had told Caleb about the fraud I found at Marston. It was an email from Caleb to me. But the subject line was FDAUD industry chatter. He had forwarded me an email chain by mistake number looking at the body. He had meant to forward me an article link, but he had accidentally included the thread below it. I squinted at the screen. The email below was from Julian Banks to Caleb. "Caleb, thanks for the heads up on the Marston situation. Good intel. I spoke to Vane this morning. He's going to handle the personnel issue. We can't have a junior associate blowing up the merger before it closes. You did the right thing telling me. This shows maturity. Let's talk about that promotion next week." I stopped breathing. You did the right thing telling me. Caleb hadn't just used my words for a speech. He had used my life for a promotion. I had told him about the fraud in confidence, seeking advice from my big brother. And he had turned around and traded that information to his boss, who was friends with my boss. He had warned them. He had given them the head start they needed to build the narrative that I was difficult and unstable before I could even file the official report. He had sold me. I closed the laptop. The sound echoed in the empty office like a gunshot. I stood up. I put on my coat. I wasn't going to call him. I was going to see him. Caleb lived in a loft downtown that looked like a catalog for bachelor success. Exposed brick, leather furniture, a kitchen that had never seen a cooked meal. He opened the door wearing a cashmere sweater and a smile that faltered when he saw my face. "Jen," he said, "everything okay?" "You didn't call?" I walked past him into the apartment. It smelled of expensive cedar candles. I was in the neighborhood. I said. He closed the door, looking confused. "Okay, well, can I get you a drink?" "I have some nice scotch?" "No," I said. I stood in the middle of his living room, keeping my coat on. "I met with Arden today." Caleb's posture stiffened. He walked over to the kitchen island and picked up a glass, swirling the liquid inside. "I told you to ignore her," he said, his voice casual but tight. "She is on a crusade. She thinks she is saving the world one interview at a time. It is exhausting. She is interesting." I said. "She told me about the Innovators Summit. She said you gave a great speech." Caleb beamed, relaxing slightly. "Oh, yeah, it went well. A lot of good feedback. She mentioned a phrase you used." I continued, watching him. "The structural integrity of invisible systems." Caleb froze. The glass stopped moving in his hand. "She said the crowd loved it." He turned to face me, his smile fixed. "Yeah. Well, you know how it is. You have to give them something poetic. I wrote that." "Caleb." He laughed. But it was a nervous sound. "What I wrote that phrase. In the presentation deck I sent you 3 years ago. The one you told me was too dry. The one you told me to delete." Caleb set the glass down. He sighed, running a hand through his perfect hair. "Jesus. Jenna, are we really doing this?" "It is just words. Everyone borrows language. I probably read it somewhere and it's stuck in my subconscious. You can't copyright a sentence. You didn't read it somewhere." I said, my voice rising. "You read it in my work, and you told me it was bad, and then you used it to make yourself look smart. You are being dramatic," he said, his tone shifting to that familiar, condescending brotherly register. "You are always so territorial. Look, if it makes you feel better. I will credit you in the footnotes next time." Happy. It wasn't about the footnotes. It was about the pattern. "It is funny," I said. "Arden thinks you are threatened by her. She thinks you are waiting for her to fail." Caleb's eyes narrowed. He took a step toward me. "Arden is stressed. She is planning a wedding and trying to win another Pulitzer. She imagines things. And honestly, Genesis, you shouldn't be feeding her paranoia. She is fragile right now. She doesn't seem fragile to me." I said, "She seems like she is waking up." Caleb's face hardened. The charm evaporated, leaving something cold and ugly underneath. "Stay away from her. Genesis, I mean it. I don't want you filling her head with your professional victimhood. You have a chip on your shoulder because you burned out at Marston, and I get it. But don't poison my fiancé just because you are miserable." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had worshipped as a child, the man I had protected. I didn't burn out at Marston. "Caleb, I was pushed." He shrugged. "Same result. You couldn't handle the politics. That is why you are where you are, and I am where I am. Some of us are built for the game, and some of us are built to watch." I felt the phone in my pocket, the weight of the email I had found, the proof that he hadn't just watched me fall, he had greased the ledge. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. I felt like Arden. "You are right, Caleb," I said. "Some of us are built for the game." I turned to the door. "By the way," I said, pausing with my hand on the latch, "I got a job offer today. Aurelius Capital. They want me to lead their integrity overhaul." Caleb's face went slack. "Aurelius Thorne's shop." "Yes, it is a very visible role." He stared at me. "You can't take that. Why not?" "Because," he stammered, looking for a reason. "Because you are not ready for that level of scrutiny. Thorne is a butcher. He will chew you up. Or maybe," I said softly, "you are just afraid I will finally be big enough to cast a shadow on you." I opened the door. "I am taking the job, Caleb, and I'm doing the interview with Arden." I walked out into the hallway. "Genesis," he called after me. I didn't stop. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button. As the doors closed, I pulled out my phone. I had a message from Arden. drafting the outline tonight. How brave are we feeling? I typed back. Brave. Then I opened my contacts and found Elias Thorne's number. I was done being the invisible system. It was time to show them the structural integrity of my rage. The wedding planning arrived like a weather system, a sprawling, high-pressure front that settled over the family and refused to move. My mother treated the event not as a celebration of love, but as a geopolitical summit where the seating chart was a declaration of war and the floral arrangements were treaties. Because I was the unattached sister, the one whose calendar was presumed to be empty of anything meaningful, I was designated the logistical lieutenant. Caleb was the star, Arden was the prize, and I was the infrastructure. Genesis is so reliable, my mother said during a Sunday brunch, sliding a binder across the table that weighed as much as a brick. She handles details. Caleb is a big-picture thinker. We do not want to bog him down with vendor contracts. I looked at the binder. It was color-coded. I run a company, Mom, I said, keeping my voice level. I have clients. I have audits. Oh, stop, my mother said, waving a hand adorned with a diamond that caught the light. You can do this in your sleep. It is just organization. Besides, it is good practice for when it is your turn. Caleb, sitting across from me, took a bite of his eggs Benedict and grinned. She is right. Jenma, you are a wizard with spreadsheets. Just make sure the band doesn't play anything too obscure. Arden hates jazz. He said it with the casual entitlement of a man who has never had to book a venue in his life. He was positioning me, inch by inch, into the role of the spinster aunt, the helpful shadow who makes sure the lights are on so the stars can shine. It was a tactical distraction. If I was busy arguing with florists about the shade of hydrangeas, I would not have time to think about the Marston case. I would not have time to think about the stolen phrases in his presentation deck. I pushed the binder back slightly. I will review the contracts, I said, but I'm not picking the tablecloths. Caleb clapped me on the shoulder. That is the spirit. Team effort. I watched him. He looked relaxed, golden, untouchable, but I noticed that his phone was always face down on the table, and every time it vibrated, his eyes flickered toward it with a nervous, rodent-like intensity. 2 days later, Arden sent me a calendar invite. Foresight Interview, Part 2. The location was a rented studio space in the Arts District, a room with soundproofing on the walls and a single, large window overlooking the Gray River. When I arrived, Arden was already there, setting up a digital recorder on a small round table. She looked tired. The polish of the Pemberton Prize winner was still there, but there were shadows under her eyes that makeup could not entirely hide. This is on the record, she said, her voice crisp. I sat down. I understand. She pressed the red button. The light blinked, a steady, unblinking eye. In our last conversation, we discussed the Marston case and the culture of silence that surrounds corporate compliance. Arden began, You described the mechanism of the fraud. You described the technical failure. But when I reviewed the transcript, I realized there was a missing piece. She paused, leaning forward. Whistleblowers are usually isolated. They are usually outliers. But you were not an outlier. Genesis. You were on the partnership track. You were the golden child of that firm until the moment you were not. My question is this: did you ever suspect that someone close to you benefited from your fall? The room went very quiet. The only sound was the hum of the ventilation system. I looked at the recorder. I looked at Arden. She was not asking as my future sister-in-law. She was asking as a journalist who smelled blood. I hesitated. To answer this was to cross a line I had drawn in the sand 5 years ago. It was to admit that the betrayal was not just professional, but tribal. I did not suspect it at the time. I said slowly, I believed it was just corporate self-preservation. The firm needed a scapegoat. I was convenient. And now Arden pressed, Now, I said, choosing my words with the precision of a surgeon. I believe convenience is rarely accidental. Arden watched me. She knew I was holding back. Let's go back further, she said, before Marston. You and your brother were both working in finance in the same city. He was at the venture firm. You were at the consultancy, Did your professional lives ever overlap? I felt a cold sweat prickle at my hairline. Once, I said, tell me. It was 6 years ago. I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, detached and clinical. Caleb had just started at the firm. He was managing a portfolio for a mid-sized tech incubator. He made a mistake in the valuation models. It was an honest error, a formulaic slip, but it inflated the projected returns by 40%. If he had reported it, he would have lost his bonus. He might have been fired. He was the new guy. He was on probation. I took a breath. He came to me. He was panicking. He asked me to help him fix the model before the quarterly review. And you did. I fixed it. I said. I went into the shared data room, he gave me his login, and I recalibrated the projection to match the actuals. I smoothed it over so it looked like a market correction rather than a clerical error. It saved his job. And what did it cost you? Arden asked. I looked out the window at the river. 6 months later, during my own performance review at my firm, compliance flagged a conflict of interest. They had found a log of an external IP address accessing a client server, my brother's client. I had not declared the familial connection because I was trying to protect him. I could not explain why I was in the system without admitting he had been incompetent. So I took the hit. I got a formal reprimand for unauthorized data access. It stayed in my file. Arden's eyes were wide. So when the Marston case happened a year later, she said, her voice dropping, they already had a file on you. They already had a narrative that you were loose with data protocols. Yes, I said. The reprimand made me vulnerable. It made me easy to paint as rogue. And Caleb Arden asked, what did he do when you got the reprimand? He told me I should have been more careful. I said, he told me that family helps family, but I needed to learn to cover my tracks better. Arden reached into her bag. The sound of the zipper was loud in the quiet room. She pulled out a manila envelope and slid it across the table. This arrived at my apartment yesterday, she said. No return address. I opened the envelope. Inside were photocopies of emails. Not digital prints, but photographs of a computer screen, grainy and dark. I picked up the first one. It was an email from a disposable account, sent to the head of HR at my old firm, dated 1 week before I was fired from Marston. Subject concern regarding G. Reed, to whom it concerns. It has come to my attention that Ms. Reed has a history of unauthorized access to client data. Please reference the incident regarding the incubator portfolio last year. There is a pattern of instability here that should be considered before finalizing the Marston audit. I felt the blood drain from my face. The incident regarding the incubator portfolio. Only 2 people knew about that incident. Me and Caleb. There is more, Arden said softly. Look at the second page. I turned the page. It was a bank transfer receipt, a small amount, $5,000, paid from Michelle LLC to a private research firm that specialized in reputation management. The date coincided with the week the rumors about me started circulating in the industry. This wasn't just my brother covering his own ass. Arden said, this was an organized campaign. Someone paid to make sure your credibility was destroyed before you could blow the whistle on Marston. And whoever sent that anonymous tip knew exactly which skeleton in your closet would hurt the most. I stared at the grainy image. The betrayal I had felt before was a dull ache. This was a sharp, serrated knife. Caleb had used the favor I did for him, the favor that saved his career, as the weapon to end mine. I put the paper down. My hands were trembling. Does he know you have this? I asked. No, Arden said. And I don't know who sent it. But Genesis, someone else is watching him. Someone else wants him to fall. I looked at the red light on the recorder. Turn it off, I said. Arden reached out and clicked the button. The light died. I need you to promise me something. I said, anything. Do not publish this yet, not this part. Why, Arden asked. It proves you were framed. Because if you publish it now, he will spin it. He will say, I am a vindictive sister trying to ruin his wedding. He will say I am jealous. I need more than an anonymous tip. I need to catch him doing it now. Arden looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, she said. We wait. But Genesis, be careful. If he did this to his own sister for a promotion, imagine what he will do to keep the life he has built now. The next morning, Caleb walked into my office. He didn't knock. He just breezed past my receptionist, carrying a large gift bag and 2 coffees. He looked fresh, rested, and expensive. He was wearing a suit that I knew cost $4,000 because I had seen the charge on his card when I helped him refinance his apartment. Jen, he announced, setting the coffees on my desk. Working hard, or hardly working, I slowly closed the file I was reading. It was the engagement letter from Aurelius Capital. What are you doing here, Caleb? He pulled a chair up and sat down, radiating aggressive cheerfulness. I come bearing gifts, he said, pushing the bag toward me. Open it. I looked at the bag. It was from a high-end boutique that sold handbags I had never had a use for. I reached in and pulled out a leather tote. It was beautiful, soft, and completely impractical for carrying files. I felt bad about the other night. Caleb said, his voice dropping to a register of practiced sincerity. I was stressed. I snapped at you. I didn't mean what I said about you being jealous. We are a team. Jen, always have been. I looked at the bag, then at him. He was smiling, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were scanning my desk, looking for papers, looking for screens. This is very generous. Caleb, I said, you deserve it. You are the rock of this family. Mom is driving me crazy with the wedding stuff, and I know she is leaning on you. I just wanted to say thank you. He took a sip of his coffee. So, he said casually, did you take the meeting with Thorne? I didn't blink. I am considering it. Caleb nodded. Too quickly. Look, I was thinking about it. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it is a good opportunity. In fact, I know Elias pretty well. I could put in a good word for you. Make sure the contract is favorable. My internal alarm bells began to ring so loudly, I wondered if he could hear them. Caleb never offered to help unless there was a toll booth he could operate. I can handle my own contracts. Caleb, I know. But Aurelius is tricky. They have these non-disclosure agreements that are basically life sentences. I just want to make sure you don't sign anything that limits you. Or us. Us, I asked. Family, he said. You know, we have to look out for each other. If you go to work for Thorne, you are going to see things. I just want to make sure we are on the same page. A fresh start. No secrets. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. Arden is intense. Genoa, she is digging into things that don't matter anymore. If she asks you about the old days, about the early stuff, just remember who was there for you when you got fired. Remember who helped you set up this place. I remembered him lending me $5,000 to pay the first month's rent. A loan he mentioned at every Thanksgiving dinner for 3 years until I paid him back with 10% interest. I remember everything. Caleb, I said. He stared at me, trying to read the tone. He couldn't quite decide if it was a threat or a reassurance. Good, he said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. Good. We are good. He patted the desk. Enjoy the bag. It is Italian. He walked out. I looked at the bag. It felt like a bribe. It felt like a muzzle made of calfskin. I picked up my phone and called Maya. Maya had been my best friend since law school. She was a litigator who specialized in divorce and defamation. She had a heart of gold and a mind like a bear trap. Lunch, I said. Now, we met at a deli halfway between our offices. I told her everything. I told her about the interview, the stolen phrase, the anonymous package, and Caleb's sudden generosity. Maya listened, eating a pickle with terrifying aggression. He is terrified, she said when I finished. He knows the house of cards is shaking. But the package, Maya. Who sent it? Maya shrugged. An enemy. Your brother has been climbing the ladder for 10 years. You don't get to where he is without stepping on faces. Someone kept the receipts. She pointed a fry at me. But listen to me. Jenna, you need to be careful with Arden. I thought you liked Arden. I do. She is a killer. I respect killers. But she is a journalist first. She is a fiancée second. And you? You are a source. Maya lowered her voice. Engagement season is dangerous. It is when people rewrite history to fit the wedding album. Arden is writing a story. You are a character in it. If she drops a bomb on Caleb, you are going to be in the blast radius. If that article comes out and says, Caleb Reed sabotaged sister, you become the girl who got sabotaged. You become the victim again. Is that what you want? No, I said. I want to be the one who wins. Then you need leverage, Maya said. Real leverage. Not just sad stories about the past. You need something on him that matters today. The engagement party was 2 weeks away, but there was a preliminary family gathering that Saturday, a casual cocktail hour at my parents' house to welcome Arden's aunt who had flown in from London. The house was filled with the low hum of polite conversation. My father was mixing martinis. My mother was showing Arden's aunt the garden. I stood by the bookshelf, nursing a sparkling water. I watched Arden. She was standing on the patio, holding a glass of wine she hadn't touched. She wasn't talking to anyone. She was watching Caleb. Caleb was in the center of the room, holding court. He was telling a story about a difficult negotiation he had closed last week. He was animated, charming, using his hands to punctuate the beats. So I told him, Look, integrity isn't a line item. It's the whole balance sheet. The group laughed. They looked at him with admiration. But Arden wasn't looking at him with admiration. She was looking at him with a flat, clinical detachment. Her eyes tracked his gestures. She watched him touch the arm of the woman he was talking to. She watched him check his reflection in the mirror over the mantel. It wasn't the look of a woman in love. It was the look of a woman solving a puzzle she didn't like the answer to. She turned her head and saw me watching her. For a second, we just stared at each other across the crowded room. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just raised her glass slightly, a microscopic salute, and then turned back to the patio. I felt a shiver go down my spine. I was relieved that she saw him, but I was also afraid, because if she pulled the thread, the whole sweater was going to unravel, and I was still wearing it. The next morning, the contract from Aurelius Capital arrived in my inbox. It was 70 pages long. I printed it out and sat on my living room floor with a highlighter. Most of it was standard: salary, equity vesting, termination clauses. But then I got to page 52, Section 14, Confidentiality and Non-Disparagement. The employee agrees to maintain perpetual confidentiality regarding all prior, current, and future business associations of Aurelius Capital, its subsidiaries, and its consultants. This includes, but is not limited to, any information regarding third-party vendors, independent contractors, and strategic advisors. And then, the kicker. The employee agrees that any breach of this confidentiality, including the disclosure of information obtained prior to employment that could negatively impact the reputation of the firm or its associated parties, will result in immediate termination and forfeiture of all vested equity, and invites liability for damages not less than $5 million. I stared at the number, $5 million, and information obtained prior to employment. They were trying to gag me retroactively. If Caleb was consulting for Aurelius, which the outline hinted he was, then this clause was designed to stop me from ever talking about him. If I signed this, and then I spoke to Arden, or if I released the proof about the Marston case, Aurelius could sue me into oblivion for damaging the reputation of an associated party. It was a trap, a beautiful, gold-plated trap. I picked up my phone to call Maya, but then I heard a noise. I was at the office. It was late, 7 in the evening. Everyone else had gone home, but I heard a voice coming from the conference room down the hall. I got up and walked softly down the corridor. The door was ajar. Caleb was in there. He sometimes used my conference room for overflow meetings because his office was being renovated, or so he claimed. I usually allowed it because it was easier than fighting him. He was on the phone. He was pacing. No, Elias, you don't understand. He was saying. His voice was agitated. She is good. She is the best. But she is delicate. I froze. Yes, I know you need the compliance sign-off, and she will give it to you. I can manage her. I have been managing her for 30 years. Just make sure the NDA holds. If she starts asking questions about the Alpha Fund or the shell accounts..." He paused, listening. "Right, exactly. We position it as a legacy cleanup. She loves cleaning up messes. It makes her feel important. We let her fix the small stuff, and we keep the structural debt in the dark pools. She won't look there if she thinks she's running the show." My blood turned to ice. He wasn't just consulting, he was orchestrating. He was setting me up to be the patsy again. He was going to let me clean up the surface of Aurelius while he and Thorne hid the real bodies in the basement. And he was using my own name to do it. I pushed the door open. Caleb spun around. His face went pale when he saw me. "I will call you back," he said into the phone. And hung up. "Jen," he said, his voice jumping an octave. "I didn't know you were here. Who were you talking to?" I asked. "Just a client. You called him Elias. You were talking about me. You were talking about managing me." Caleb laughed. A jagged sound. "You are hearing things. I was talking about a different Genesis. Genesis Systems. It is a software integration. Don't lie to me." "Caleb," I shouted. The sound echoed in the empty office. "I heard you. You are working with Thorne. You are trying to use me to whitewash something at Aurelius." Caleb's face changed. The fear vanished, replaced by a sneer. "You are paranoid. Genesis, you know that you have been paranoid since Marston. Arden is rubbing off on you with her conspiracy theories." I walked toward him. "I am not paranoid. I am awake, and I am not signing that contract." Caleb stepped into my space. He was taller than me, broader. He used his physical presence to intimidate, something he hadn't done since we were teenagers. "You are going to sign it," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Because if you don't, I will tell Mom and Dad that you are the reason the wedding is under threat. I will tell them you are jealous and spiteful, and that you are trying to sabotage my happiness because you can't find any of your own." He poked a finger at my chest. "You want to be visible. Jen, fine. But remember, when you are visible, you are a target." He brushed past me, bumping my shoulder hard, and walked out of the room. I stood there, shaking. He was right. I was a target. But targets can shoot back. I went back to my desk. I picked up the Aurelius contract. I wasn't going to sign it. Not yet. I opened my laptop and created a new file. I named it Timeline. I started typing. Date January 2021. Incident Incubator Portfolio Valuation Error. Witnesses, Caleb Reed. Genesis Reed. Date June 2021. Incident. Unauthorized access reprimand. Source anonymous. Tip suspected, C. Reed. Date current. Incident Aurelius Capital Conspiracy. I typed until my fingers hurt. I wasn't just building a defense, I was building a weapon. And tomorrow, I was going to give Arden the ammunition she needed. I hovered over the save button. For 30 years, I had been the sister who kept the peace. I pressed save. The peace was over. Arden came to my apartment at 11 o'clock at night. She was not wearing her usual armor of tailored wool and silk. She was wearing sweatpants and a raincoat over a t-shirt that looked like she had slept in it. Her hair was pulled back in a severe knot that pulled at the skin of her temples. I opened the door and stepped back. Arden walked in, smelling of rain and cold exhaust. She did not say hello. She walked straight to my kitchen island, placed her keys on the marble counter with a deliberate click, and turned to face me. "I am thinking of postponing the wedding," she said. The sentence hung in the air between us, heavy and absolute. It was the kind of sentence that divided time into before and after. I poured her a glass of water. My hand was steady, though my pulse was hammering a frantic rhythm against my throat. "Sit down, Arden," I said. She sat on one of the bar stools, wrapping her hands around the glass as if it were a source of heat. "It is not just the anonymous package," she said, her voice rough. "It is the inconsistency." I asked him about the incubator portfolio. I asked him specifically if he ever had trouble with valuation models in his first year. He looked me in the eye. Genesis. And he told me that he was the one who caught the error. He said you were the one who tried to bury it, and he had to clean it up. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was a lie so audacious, so completely inverted from the truth, that it made me dizzy. He told you I tried to bury it, I asked. He said you were overwhelmed. He said you were panic-stricken and asked him to hide the data. But he refused because of his ethical code. He said that was why you got the reprimand, because he couldn't protect you from your own incompetence without compromising his integrity. I laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound that scraped my throat. His integrity. I repeated, the structural integrity of invisible systems. Arden looked at me. Her gray eyes were not sympathetic. They were calculating. They were weighing the man she loved against the woman she was beginning to believe. I don't know who to trust. Genesis, she said quietly. But my gut tells me that the man who claims he is the hero of every story is usually the villain of one. She took a sip of water. So I have a question for you. A direct question. And I need a direct answer. Ask it. I said, if you tell the truth, Arden said, leaning forward, if you put the documents on the table and show the world what he actually did, who gets hurt first, him or you? I opened my mouth to answer, but the words died on my tongue. If I told the truth, Caleb would lose his reputation. He would lose his fiancée. He would lose the golden adoration of our parents. But me, I would lose the family. My parents would never forgive me for destroying their idol. They would see it as an act of supreme jealousy. I would be the destroyer. I would be the difficult sister who finally burned the house down. And professionally, if I admitted I had hacked a server to cover for him, even 6 years ago, I would lose my license. My consultancy would implode. I looked at Arden. We both get hurt. I said, but I am the only one who loses everything. Arden nodded slowly. She looked down at the water glass. That is what I thought, she said. He has leverage because he has nothing to lose but face. You have your livelihood. She stood up. I am not canceling yet, she said, but I am not printing invitations either. I need to know for sure. Genesis, I need to know if I am marrying a liar or just a narcissist. There is a difference. She walked to the door. Be careful with Aurelius, she added, her hand on the knob. If he is lying about the small stuff, imagine what he is lying about with $5 million on the line. The next morning, I walked into the Aurelius Capital headquarters. It was a fortress of glass and steel, designed to make you feel small. The lobby was 3 stories high, echoing with the hushed footsteps of people who managed the gross domestic product of small nations. I met with the legal team in a conference room that overlooked the entire city. They were polite, efficient, and visibly tense. They pushed the contract toward me again. We really need to get this signed. Ms. Reed, the general counsel said. The regulators are scheduling their preliminary review for next month. We need the new compliance structure in place before they arrive. I picked up the pen, but I did not sign. I need access to the data room first. I said, I cannot sign off on a cleanup if I do not know the extent of the mess. The counsel hesitated. He exchanged a glance with his associate. Standard procedure is to sign the non-disclosure agreement before access is granted, he said. I have signed the preliminary non-disclosure agreement. I countered, the employment contract is separate. I need to see the scope of work. If you want my name on the door, I need to know what is behind it. They argued. They stalled. But eventually, because they were desperate, and because Elias Thorne had told them I was the only one who could fix it, they gave me a temporary login. I sat alone in a small, windowless office they assigned to me. I logged into the secure server. I started digging. I did not look at the employee handbooks or the travel expense reports. I went straight to the folders marked Legacy Assets. I went to the subfolders marked Risk Assessment, and there, buried in a folder named Strategic Advisory, 2024, I found it. It was a memo, a strategy document prepared for the board of Aurelius Capital. The title was Project Firewall Mitigation of Regulatory Exposure via External Compliance Leadership. I opened it. The document outlined a plan to hire an external chief compliance officer to oversee a retroactive audit of a distressed fund, the Alpha Fund. The fund had been bleeding money for 2 years and had been hiding the losses in offshore shell accounts. The regulators were closing in. The plan was simple. Hire a reputable, independent consultant, give them limited access, have them sign off on a sanitized version of the books. When the regulators inevitably found the fraud, the firm could claim they had hired an expert who had failed to detect it. The external consultant was the firewall. The external consultant was the scapegoat. I scrolled down to the section titled Strategic Partners, and there was his name, Caleb Reed, Senior Advisor, Ethical Governance. My brother wasn't just consulting for the firm, he had written the playbook. I read the paragraph under his name. Mr. Reed advises that the ideal candidate for the CCO role should be methodical, detail-oriented, and eager for validation. He suggests that the firm leverage existing relationships to secure a candidate who will prioritize procedural correctness over forensic investigation. Eager for validation. He had sold me. He had sold me to Elias Thorne as the perfect patsy. He knew I would be so flattered by the offer, so desperate to finally be visible, that I would walk right into the trap. He knew I would focus on the spreadsheets and miss the context, and he was getting paid a retainer of $20,000 a month to do it. I sat back in the chair. The air in the room felt thin. I thought about the phone call I had overheard. We let her fix the small stuff, and we keep the structural debt in the dark pools. He was going to let me go to prison, or at least, he was going to let me lose my career, my reputation, and my future, just so he could be the ethical advisor who tried his best to save the firm from my negligence. It was the Marston case all over again. But this time, he wasn't just capitalizing on my fall. He was engineering it. I took out my phone. I took photographs of the screen. I took photographs of the memo, the dates, the signature page where Caleb had signed off on the strategy. Then I logged out. I walked out of the office. The general counsel was waiting in the hallway. "Did you find everything you needed?" "Ms. Reed," he asked. I smiled at him. It was the coldest smile I had ever worn. "Yes," I said. "I have everything I need. I will be in touch regarding the contract." I walked to the elevator. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I felt a strange, crystalline clarity. The sister who protected the family was dead. She had died in that windowless room. 2 days later, I sat on a park bench in the financial district. It was lunchtime, and the square was crowded with people eating salads out of plastic containers. I was waiting for Peter. Peter had been a junior analyst at my old firm. He was the one I suspected had sent the anonymous tip 5 years ago. I had found him on LinkedIn. He was working in sales for a mid-tier logistics company now. He looked 10 years older than his profile picture. He sat down next to me, clutching a paper bag. He looked nervous. "Genesis," he said. "It has been a long time." "Hello, Peter," I said. "Thank you for meeting me." He looked around the park. "What is this about?" "You said you had a job opportunity?" I lied. I said. Peter stiffened. He started to stand up. "Sit down." "Peter," I said softly, "I am not here to hurt you. I am here to ask you about the $5,000. He froze. He sank back onto the bench, his face going gray. "I don't know what you are talking about. I have the receipt." I lied. "I have the transfer record from the Shell LLC. I know you sent the email to HR about the incubator portfolio. I know you were the one who told them I was unstable." Peter stared at his hands. He was sweating, despite the cool wind. "I needed the money," he whispered. "My mom was sick. I was drowning in student loans. They said it was just a character reference. They said they just needed to know if you were reliable." "Who is they?" I asked. He hesitated. "Who paid you?" "Peter." "Was it Robert Vane?" "No." He said, "It wasn't Vane. It was a guy named Banks, Julian Banks." I closed my eyes. Julian Banks, Caleb's mentor, the man who had given Caleb his first big promotion. "He called me," Peter said, the words spilling out now. "He said he was doing a background check on you for a potential client. He asked if I knew anything damaging. I told him I didn't. Then he asked if I knew anything about your brother. My eyes snapped open. He asked about Caleb, yeah. He asked if Caleb had ever messed up. And I knew about the valuation error. I saw you fixing it in the data room that night. I told Banks that Caleb made the mistake. But you fixed it. Peter looked at me, his eyes pleading. I thought that was it. But then Banks called me back a week later. He said he would pay me $5,000 if I wrote an email to HR saying you were the one who made the mistake. He said if I didn't do it, he would tell Vane that I was the one who leaked the Marston data. He blackmailed me. Genesis. I stared at him. It wasn't just Caleb. It was Caleb and Banks. They had colluded. Caleb had likely told Banks about the error to clear his own conscience. And Banks ruthless. Pragmatic Banks had decided to use it to destroy me when I became inconvenient. And Caleb had let him. Caleb had known. He had to have known. You don't get a promotion from a man like Julian Banks without knowing where the bodies are buried. Did you ever talk to Caleb about it? I asked. Once, Peter said. About a year later, I ran into him at a bar. I was drunk. I asked him if he knew what Banks made me do, and he bought me a drink. He told me that loyalty was a currency, and I had just made a deposit. Then he walked away. I felt sick. Will you testify? I asked. If it comes to it? Peter looked terrified. I can't. Genesis. I have a family now. Banks still has pull. If I talk, he will crush me. I reached into my bag and pulled out a card. It was Arden's business card. You don't have to talk to the police. I said, you just have to talk to her. She can protect you. She can make you a source. Anonymous. Peter took the card. He looked at it for a long time. He is getting married. Isn't he? Peter asked. To that reporter? Yes. She deserves to know. Peter said, she deserves to know he is a monster. He put the card in his pocket and walked away. I went to Arden's apartment that night. I didn't call first. I have it. I said when she opened the door. I walked in and laid the photos of the Aurelius memo on her table. I told her about Peter. I told her about Julian Banks. Arden looked at the photos. She read the memo. She read the part about the eager for validation candidate. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She went very, very still. He is selling you, she whispered. He is actually selling you. Yes, and he is doing it while planning our wedding, she said. She walked to the window and looked out at the city. He is picking out appetizers and writing his vows while he sets up his sister to take the fall for a federal crime. She turned back to me. Her face was hard, like carved stone. I need the documents. Genesis. I need the photos. I need Peter's contact info. I need to write this. I hesitated. If you write this, I said, Aurelius will come after me. They will say I breached confidentiality by photographing the screen. They will sue me. Let them, Arden said fiercely. If we publish first, if we control the narrative, they are the ones on the defensive. You become a whistleblower again. But this time, you have the press behind you. You have me behind you. But the family? I started. Screw the family, Arden shouted. It was the first time I had ever heard her raise her voice. Genesis. Look at what they have done to you. They have turned you into a ghost. They have fed you to the wolves to keep Caleb warm. That is not a family. That is a cult. She grabbed my shoulders. You are already living inside their story, she said, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. You are a character they wrote. The difficult sister, the failure, the scapegoat. Do you want to die in that story? Or do you want to write your own? I looked at her. I looked at the fire in her eyes. I want to write my own. I said, the dress fitting was the next Saturday. It was too late to cancel the appointment without raising suspicion, and Arden had decided we needed to maintain the illusion of normalcy until she had the story locked down. My mother, Arden, and I were in the private suite of a bridal salon that smelled of lavender and money. My mother was drinking champagne. Arden stood on the pedestal, wearing a gown that cost more than my car. It was beautiful. She looked like a statue. My mother was weeping softly. You look perfect, she said. Just perfect. Caleb is going to die when he sees you. Arden looked at herself in the mirror. She didn't smile. "It is a lot of tulle," she said. "Oh, nonsense," my mother said. "It is romantic. Caleb loves romantic. He is such a romantic soul. Unlike some people." She glanced at me. I was sitting on the velvet sofa, holding her purse. "Genesis is so utilitarian." My mother sighed, taking another sip of champagne. "Even as a child, always so serious, so intense." She turned back to Arden. "You have to understand. Arden, Genesis is hard to love. You have to work for it. But Caleb is easy. He just flows. He is like water. He fits anywhere." I sat there, freezing, hard to love. It wasn't a new thought. I had felt it my whole life, but hearing it said aloud, in this room, in front of the woman who was investigating my brother's corruption, felt like a physical blow. I looked at Arden. She was watching my mother in the mirror. Her expression had changed. The doubt was gone. The hesitation was gone. In its place was a cold, terrifying fury. "He flows because he has no shape," Arden said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a razor. My mother blinked. "Excuse me, water flows because it has no spine," Arden said. Turning around on the pedestal, "It takes the shape of whatever container you put it in. That isn't character. Joyce, that is just lack of substance." My mother's mouth fell open. "Arden, I don't think. And Genesis isn't hard to love." Arden interrupted. Stepping down from the pedestal, the silk rustled around her like a storm cloud. "She is just hard to control, and I think you confuse the two." The room went silent. The seamstress, who had been pinning the hem, froze with a needle in her hand. My mother looked at Arden, then at me, then back at Arden. She gave a nervous, high-pitched laugh. "Well, I suppose we are all a bit stressed." "Wedding nerves." Arden didn't answer. She walked into the changing room and slammed the curtain shut. I looked at my mother. She was flushed, angry, but mostly confused. She didn't understand. She had lived in the myth of Caleb for so long she couldn't see the reality even when it was screaming at her. I stood up. "I'm going to wait in the car," I said. I walked out. That evening, I received an email from editors. "Foresight. Subject update on your profile. Dear Genesis, we are finalizing the lineup for the 30 Under feature. Your interview was compelling, and Arden has pitched your profile as the centerpiece of the series. However, given the claims regarding the Marston case and the current landscape at Aurelius, legal is asking for more concrete validation of impact. We need sources. We need corroboration of the structural changes you implemented, and ideally, corroboration of the obstacles you faced. If we run this as a feature, it will likely be controversial. We need to be bulletproof. If you can provide documentation or point us to secondary sources by Monday, the cover spot is yours. If not, we will have to move the profile to the standard list. Best, Sarah Jenkins, Editor-in-Chief." I stared at the screen, bulletproof. They wanted the smoking gun. They wanted me to implicate Caleb formally. It wasn't just Arden anymore. It was the publication. If I did this, there was no going back. I opened a new folder on my laptop. I named it The Timeline. I started dragging files into it. The photo of the Aurelius memo. Drag. The screenshot of the email Peter sent me confirming the bribe. Drag. The scanned copy of the Marston evaluation report with my brother's login credentials in the metadata. Drag. The presentation deck where he stole my phrase. Drag. I organized them by date. I added notes. I connected the dots between Julian Banks, Caleb, and the shell companies. It wasn't just revenge. It was an exorcism. For 30 years, I had held these secrets in my body. I had let them rot me from the inside out to protect a brother who would sell me for a retainer fee. I looked at the file size. 1 gigabyte of betrayal. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't happiness. It was lighter than that. It was the feeling of dropping a heavy pack after a long march. I picked up my phone. I texted Arden. "I have the file. When do you want it?" Her response came 3 seconds later. "Now." I hit send. The file uploaded. 1%, 10%, 50%. Sent. I closed the laptop. I walked to the window of my apartment. The city lights were blurring in the rain. Somewhere out there, Caleb was probably having dinner with clients, charming them, telling them he was the ethical face of the future. He was probably making a toast. He didn't know that the future was coming for him. And she was difficult. The files sat on Arden's coffee table like two loaded weapons. One was thick, bound in a clear plastic cover, titled Genesis Reed, the Architect of Invisible Systems. The other was a loose stack of papers, heavily annotated in red ink, with no title at all. I am writing 2 stories. Genesis, Arden said. She was standing by the window, looking out at the rain that had been falling on the city for 3 days straight. I looked at the files. Which one is going to run? That depends, she said, turning to face me. The first one is the profile you agreed to. It is glowing. It talks about your methodology, your integrity, the way you save companies from their own greed. It fits perfectly into the Foresight 30 Under narrative. It is safe. It will get you clients. It will make your parents proud. And the second one I asked. She picked up the loose stack. This one is the truth, she said. It is an investigation into a pattern of corporate sabotage orchestrated by a rising venture capitalist to protect his own career at the expense of his sister. It connects the Marston audit to the Aurelius cover-up. It includes the bank transfer to Peter. It includes the stolen intellectual property. It is not a profile. It is an indictment. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. If you publish that, I said, you blow up your life. You blow up the wedding. I know, Arden said softly. That is why I haven't sent it to my editors yet. I am trying to figure out if there is a middle ground, if I can tell the truth about you without destroying him completely. But the more I dig, Genesis, the more I realize that his entire persona is built on your silence. If I give you a voice, I take away his foundation. She dropped the papers back onto the table. I am ethically allowed to publish the first one. She said, it is factual, but the second one I am his fiancée. I have access to him that a journalist shouldn't have. If I use what I know from our pillow talk against him, I am crossing a line. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. But if I don't use it, I am complicit. I stood up and walked to the table. I touched the edge of the first file, the safe file, published the profile. I said, just the profile. Let him see me winning on my own terms. That might be enough to scare him off. Arden looked doubtful. You think he will let you win? She asked. I think he is afraid of you, I said. And right now, fear is the only leverage we have. But Caleb was not afraid. He was cornered. And a cornered animal does not retreat. It attacks. The shift in him was subtle at first. It started with text messages that were almost affectionate, but carried a jagged undercurrent of surveillance. Saw you were with Arden again last night. You two are getting close. Just remember she is under a lot of pressure. Don't burden her with work drama. Then, the calls began. He called me on Tuesday morning while I was driving to the office. Jen, he said, his voice tight, I need you to stop. Stop what I asked, keeping my eyes on the road. Stop poisoning her. She is asking me questions about the incubator portfolio again. She is asking me about Julian Banks. She didn't come up with those names on her own. You are feeding her. I am answering her questions. Caleb, she is a journalist. She asks good questions. She is my fiancée, he shouted. The sound distorted over the Bluetooth speakers. You are turning her against me. You are jealous because I am happy and you are alone. So you are trying to plant seeds of doubt. It is pathetic. Genesis, I am not the one who took a bribe to smear my own sibling, I said calmly. There was a silence on the line, a heavy breathing silence. You don't know what you are talking about, he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. You have always been hysterical. That is why Vane fired you. That is why you are still working out of a warehouse. The warehouse is nice, I said. It has integrity. You want to talk about integrity? Caleb laughed. It was a dry, snapping sound. Watch yourself. Jen, you think you are safe because you are family. You are only safe because I allow you to be. He hung up. I arrived at my office with shaking hands. I told myself it was just bluster. I told myself he was panicking because he knew the walls were closing in. But 2 hours later, my receptionist buzzed me. "Ms. Reed, we just got an email from TechFlow. They are putting the retainer on hold." I froze. TechFlow was one of my oldest clients. I had just finished a comprehensive risk assessment for them. "Connect me," I said. "I got the CFO on the line." He sounded uncomfortable. "Look, Genesis, you know we love your work," he said. "But we received some concerning information this morning." "What kind of information?" I asked. Gripping the phone. "An anonymous report," he said. "It claims there are outstanding inquiries into your firm regarding data privacy breaches." It used the phrase, "instability of leadership. We have a board meeting next week. We can't have that kind of noise attached to our vendors. We have to pause the contract until it is cleared up." Instability of leadership. It was the same phrase from the email Peter had sent to HR 5 years ago. It was Caleb's signature. He wasn't just threatening me. He was executing. He was showing me that he could turn off the lights in my life whenever he wanted. I hung up the phone. I felt a wave of nausea. He was going to burn it all down. If he couldn't control me, he was going to destroy me. I went to Arden's apartment that night. I was ready to quit. I was ready to tell her to kill the story, to burn the files, to forget I ever existed. I couldn't lose my business. It was the only thing I had. But when I walked in, Arden was pacing the living room. She looked furious. I showed him. She said, "What I met him for lunch." I showed him the bank transfer. The one from the shell company to Peter. My heart stopped. "You what?" I had to see his face, Arden said. I had to know. I put the document on the table and I asked him if he knew anything about it, and he didn't deny it. Arden stopped pacing. She turned to me, her eyes wide with disbelief. He didn't even blink. "Genesis." He looked at the paper, then he looked at me, and he said, "You have to understand the context. Arden, Genesis was spiraling. She was having a breakdown. If that information hadn't come out, she would have dragged the whole firm down with her. I did what was necessary to contain the damage." I sat down on the sofa. I felt the air leaving the room. He called it containment. Arden said, her voice shaking with rage. He said if you had been less sensitive, if you had just rolled with the punches, you would have been fine. He acted like he did you a favor by getting you fired. He thinks he saved you from yourself. He believes it, I whispered. That is the terrifying part. He actually believes he is the hero who made the hard choice. Arden sat down next to me. She took my hand. He also told me that if I published anything about it, he would sue me for defamation. He said he would sue Foresight. He said he would make sure I never worked in this city again. He is bluffing. I said, no. Arden said, he isn't. He is scared, and he is dangerous. But Genesis, that is why we have to do this. Because if we stop now, he wins. He keeps his narrative. He keeps his power. And he keeps doing this to you, over and over again, until there is nothing left of you to break. I looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes. But I also saw the resolve. She was willing to risk her career for the truth. But I was the one who had to live with the consequences. I need to think. I said, I drove to my parents' house. I didn't know why. Maybe I was looking for a reason to forgive him. Maybe I was looking for a reason to stop. They were in the living room, surrounded by wedding gifts that had started to arrive early. Crystal vases, silver platters, towering stacks of boxes wrapped in white paper. Genesis, my mother said, looking up from a list she was checking. Thank God you are here. We need to talk about the seating chart. Caleb says we can't put Uncle Jerry near the bar. I didn't sit down. Caleb is trying to ruin my business. Mom, I said. My mother stopped writing. My father looked up from his newspaper. What are you talking about? My father asked. He is calling my clients. He is spreading rumors that I am unstable. He is doing it because Arden is writing a profile about me and he is afraid she is going to find out what he did 5 years ago. My mother sighed. She took off her reading glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Oh, Genesis. Not this again. It is not this again, I said, my voice rising. It is happening now. He admitted it to Arden. He told her he sabotaged me because I was sensitive. Genesis, please, my father said, folding the newspaper. We are 3 days away from the engagement party. The wedding is in 2 months. Can we just not do this right now? Not do what I asked? Not tell the truth? Not make everything about you? My mother snapped. The words hit me like a slap. She stood up. Her face flushed. Your brother is under an immense amount of pressure. He is merging a company. He is getting married. He is in the spotlight. And instead of supporting him, you are running around with these wild accusations, stressing out his fiancée, and trying to make yourself the victim. I am the victim, I shouted. He paid someone to lie about me. And maybe he had a reason, my mother yelled back. The room went dead silent. I stared at her. What did you say? My mother looked away, her hands trembling. I am just saying, you were very emotional back then. Genesis, you were struggling. Maybe Caleb was just trying to help you. Maybe he was trying to get you out of a high-pressure environment before you cracked. I looked at my father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. You knew, I whispered. They didn't answer, but the silence was answer enough. They knew. Maybe not the details, maybe not the bank transfer, but they knew he had pushed me out, and they had accepted it. They had accepted my destruction as the cost of his ascension. I realized then that they weren't asking me to keep the peace. They were asking me to stay dead. They preferred a successful son and a broken daughter to a messy truth. I backed away toward the door. You don't want a daughter, I said, my voice breaking. You want an audience. I walked out of the house. I left them with their crystal vases and their white boxes. I drove until the house was just a speck in the rear-view mirror, and then I kept driving. I met Maya at a diner at 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep. I felt like I was vibrating. I told her about the client. I told her about the parents. I told her about the NDA. Maya read through the Aurelius contract again, her eyes scanning the fine print under the fluorescent lights. Okay, she said, circling a paragraph with a red pen. Here is the vulnerability. The non-disparagement clause is overly broad. It defines associated parties as anyone Caleb has ever met. Basically, in New York, that is unenforceable. A judge would throw it out. So I can sign it? I asked. Maya looked at me over her glasses. You can sign it, and you can break it, and you will probably win in court, eventually. But Genesis, do you have $200,000 to spend on a retainer for a defense team? Because Aurelius does. They will bury you in motions. They will depose every client you have ever had. They will subpoena your medical records. They will make the process the punishment. She put the pen down. That is how guys like Thorne and Caleb win. They don't win on the law. They win on the burn rate. They bet that you will run out of money before they run out of malice. I looked at my bank account balance on my phone. I had savings, but not enough for a war. So I am trapped, I said. Not trapped, Maya said. Just outgunned. Unless what? Unless you strike first, she said. Unless you detonate the bomb before they can file the suit. If the story is already out, if the public opinion has already shifted, they might decide that suing you just draws more attention to the fraud. She took a bite of her toast. It is a gamble, Gensho, but right now, you are playing defense against a team that owns the stadium. Maybe it is time to burn the stadium down. I went back to Arden's. It was dawn. The sky was a bruised purple. I stood in her kitchen. I can't do it, I said. Arden looked up from her laptop. She looked exhausted. What I can't sign the NDA, and I can't afford to fight it. If we publish the investigation, Caleb will sue me, and Aurelius will sue me, and I will be bankrupt in 6 months. I have to walk away. I have to tell the editors to pull the profile. Arden stood up. She walked over to me. Genesis, listen to me. No, you listen, I said, tears finally spilling over. I am not you. Arden, I don't have a trust fund. I don't have a prize. I built my company from nothing. If I lose it, I have nothing. I can't be a martyr for the truth. I just want to survive. Arden grabbed my shoulders. Her grip was strong. Is staying quiet? Still protection, she asked. Or is it just habit? I stared at her. Look at what happened yesterday, she said. You stayed quiet, and you still lost a client. You stayed quiet, and your parents still blamed you. You stayed quiet, and Caleb still threatened you. Silence isn't protecting you anymore. Genesis, it is just making you an easier target. She let go of me and stepped back. But I have an idea. A compromise. I wiped my face. What we publish the profile. Just the profile. The one about your work. The one about your integrity. But we add one paragraph. One paragraph. A paragraph that clarifies the timeline of your career. We don't name Caleb. We don't name Aurelius. We just state, legally and factually, that you left your previous firm due to a conflict of interest involving a family member's error that you corrected. We frame it as you taking the high road. How does that help? I asked. Because, Arden said, her eyes gleaming. I will send the draft to Caleb for comment. As a courtesy, I frowned. He will demand you cut it. Exactly. And I will refuse. And when he realizes that I'm not going to let him rewrite your history anymore, he will panic. He will make a mistake. And when he makes a mistake, we will catch him. She held out her hand. Let me send the draft. Let me draw him out. I looked at her hand. I looked at the bruise on the sky outside. Okay, I said. Send it. The next 24 hours were a blur of anxiety. I waited for the explosion. It came at 10 o'clock the night before the engagement party. I was in my apartment, trying to steam the dress I was supposed to wear. It was a gray silk dress. My mother had picked it out. She said it was dignified. My computer pinged. Urgent editorial query. Foresight 30 under. I walked over to the desk. My stomach turned over. Dear Genesis, I hope this finds you well. We are in the final stages of fact-checking your profile for tomorrow's launch. However, we have received a formal complaint regarding the intellectual property cited in your interview. A representative for Caleb Reed has contacted us claiming that the concept of structural integrity of invisible systems is a trademarked methodology of his consulting practice. He alleges that you are misappropriating his proprietary framework to bolster your own credentials. He has provided a time-stamped presentation deck from 2024 as proof of authorship. He is demanding that we retract the phrase and issue a correction, or pull the profile entirely. We need your response within 2 hours. If we cannot verify your authorship, we will have to kill the piece. Best, Sarah. I stared at the screen. The room spun. He wasn't just blocking the story. He was stealing the words. He had provided a deck from 2024, but I had written the phrase in 2023. I scrambled to find my external hard drive, the one with the old backups, the one I had used to find the email about the incubator. I plugged it in. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely control the mouse. I searched for presentation_draft_V1. There it was. Created November 12, 2023. I opened it. Slide 4. The structural integrity of invisible systems. I had the proof. I had the timestamp. But as I looked at the screen, I realized something else. He had accused me of stealing. He had made it a formal legal complaint. He had gone on the record. If I sent this file to the editor, I wasn't just proving I wrote a phrase. I was proving that Caleb Reed, the ethical face of Aurelius Capital, had lied to a national publication. I was proving he had falsified a claim of intellectual property theft. This wasn't just a defensive move. This was perjury. I picked up my phone. I dialed Arden. He took the bait. I said, "What did he do?" Arden asked. He claimed he wrote the phrase. He filed a complaint with the editor. He sent a fake timestamp. Arden let out a breath. It sounded like a laugh, but sharper. He put it in writing, she asked. Yes. Send me the 2023 file, Arden said, and send it to the editor. I hovered over the send button. If I did this, there was no turning back. The profile would run. The correction would expose him. The engagement party tomorrow would be a funeral for his reputation. I thought about my mother's voice. Keep the peace. Genesis. I thought about Caleb's voice. You are only safe because I allow you to be. I looked at the gray dress hanging on the door, the dress that was meant to make me invisible. I wasn't going to be invisible tomorrow. I attached the file. Dear Sarah, please find attached the original source file, dated 1 year prior to Mr. Reed's claim. The methodology is mine, the words are mine, and I do not consent to their erasure. Proceed with the profile. Genesis. I hit send. I watched the progress bar. Sent. I stood up and walked to the dress. I took it off the hanger. I walked to the kitchen and dropped it into the trash can. I wasn't wearing gray tomorrow. I was wearing red. The venue for the engagement party was a restored glassworks factory in the warehouse district. The kind of space that signaled effortless wealth. It had soaring ceilings, exposed beams, and a bar carved from a single block of ice. The room was already crowded when I arrived, filled with the specific, polished hum of people who knew they were important. I wore the red dress. It was a dark, blood-red silk that moved like water. It was not a dress for a shadow. It was a dress for a woman who intended to be seen. My mother saw me first. Her eyes widened, darting from my face to the hem of the gown. She opened her mouth to say something, likely that it was too bold, too loud, too much, but she closed it again when a senator's wife tapped her on the shoulder. I walked into the room. Caleb was in the center of the floor, holding court. He looked magnificent in a tuxedo, the very image of the golden sun. He was laughing, his head thrown back, one hand resting possessively on the small of Arden's back. People gravitated toward him like moths to a flame, drawn by the warmth of his charisma. They didn't know the warmth was an incinerator. I watched him. I watched the way he made eye contact with a venture capitalist, the way he nodded gravely at a judge. He was performing goodness, and everyone was buying a ticket. Arden saw me. She detached herself from Caleb's side with a fluid grace and walked toward me. She wore white, stark and architectural, but her face was pale. "You came," she said, her voice low. "I told you I wasn't hiding anymore," I said. Arden took my arm and steered me toward a quiet alcove near the coat check. Her grip was tight. "We have a problem," she said, "or maybe a solution. I am not sure yet. What is it Sarah called me 10 minutes ago? The foresight piece is running. Tomorrow morning, I asked. Now, Arden said. In 5 minutes. My stomach dropped. Why? Because the rumors about TechFlow pausing your contract leaked to a gossip blog. Someone is trying to get ahead of the narrative that your firm is unstable. Sarah decided the only way to protect the integrity of the profile is to publish it immediately, before the smear campaign takes hold. Did you do this? I asked, searching her face. Did you push the timeline? No, Arden said, but I didn't stop it. I pulled my arm away. Are you using me? Arden, I asked, is this just a story to you, a way to win another prize? You are blowing up my life in the middle of a party. Arden looked at me. Her eyes were fierce and unblinking. I came for a story. Genesis. I admit that. I saw a crack in the perfect Reed family facade, and I wanted to see what was behind it. But I stayed because of you. She stepped closer. I stayed because in a room full of people pretending to be perfect, you are the only one telling the truth. You are the only one who bleeds when you are cut. I am not using you. I am betting on you. I looked at her. I wanted to believe her. 5 minutes, I asked. 3 now, she said, checking her watch. We stood there in the alcove, listening to the laughter from the main room. It sounded brittle now, fragile. Then, phones started to light up. It began as a ripple, a few people checking notifications, then a murmur, then heads turning. I saw Elias Thorne, the CEO of Aurelius, pull his phone from his pocket. He frowned. He tapped the screen. His eyes shot across the room and landed on me. Then he looked at Caleb. The piece was live. I took out my own phone. There it was, at the top of the feed. The architect of invisible systems, how Genesis Reed built a kingdom of truth in a city of lies. I scrolled down. It was beautiful. It detailed the complex compliance structures I had built. It quoted my clients, the ones Caleb hadn't gotten to yet, praising my rigor. It was a validation of my entire professional life. And then, the paragraph. Reed's career began in the shadow of a complex ethical dilemma. 5 years ago, while rising through the ranks of a major consultancy, she discovered a critical error in a valuation model managed by a family member. Sources confirm that Reed corrected the error to protect the individual's career, an act of loyalty that was later weaponized against her to force her exit from the firm. It taught me that integrity is personal, Reed says, and sometimes, the people you protect are the ones who hand you the bill. It didn't name Caleb, but in this room, in this city, everyone knew who the family member was. Everyone knew the timeline. I looked up. Caleb was staring at his phone. His face had gone the color of ash. He looked up. He saw me. He saw Arden standing next to me. He didn't walk over. He stormed. "What is this?" he hissed, shoving the phone in Arden's face. "What the hell is this?" Arden didn't flinch. "It is a profile. Caleb. It is the truth. It is a hit piece," he shouted. His voice cracked, loud enough that the nearby conversation group stopped and turned. "You imply that I was incompetent. You imply that she saved me. I did save you," I said, stepping forward. My voice was steady. "I fixed the model. Caleb, and you paid Peter $5,000 to say I broke it." The room went deadly silent. The jazz band faltered and stopped. Caleb turned on me. His eyes were wild. "You are lying," he screamed. "You are always lying. You are jealous. You have been jealous since we were kids. You can't stand that. I am the one who succeeded. You can't stand that. I am the one people love." He spun around to the crowd. Arms wide. "She has always been like this, always competing. She tries to tear me down because she knows she can't keep up. She is threatened by me. She has been threatened by my competence for years." It was a confession disguised as an accusation. He was unraveling. The charm was gone, peeling away to reveal the terrified, petty man underneath. "Caleb," my father barked, stepping out of the crowd. "Stop this." My mother rushed forward, grabbing Caleb's arm. "Not here," she hissed. "Not in front of everyone. Please. Genesis, tell them it is a misunderstanding. Tell them it is a mistake. Keep the peace." She looked at me with desperate, wet eyes. She was begging me to fix it. She was begging me to absorb the blast one last time. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had called me hard to love. "No," I said. My mother froze. "What I am done keeping the peace, Mom," I said. My voice rang out in the quiet hall. "Because the peace you want is just my silence. You don't want a family. You want a fan club for Caleb. You want me to shrink so he can feel big." I looked at Caleb. "I didn't want your approval. Caleb, I wanted a brother, but you sold me for a promotion, and I am done paying for it." Caleb stared at me. He looked small. For the first time in his life, he looked small. Arden stepped forward. She was holding her phone. "There is a second article," she said clearly. Caleb whipped his head around. "It is an investigative report," Arden continued. "It details the Aurelius cover-up. It details the shell companies. It details the payments to Peter. It is fully drafted. It is ready to go." She looked at Caleb, then at me. "But I haven't submitted it yet." She turned to me. "It is your choice. Genesis, you are the source, you are the victim, and you are the architect. Do you want to protect the narrative, or do you want to burn it down?" The room held its breath. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a call from a number I recognized. The General Counsel of Aurelius Capital. I answered it. I put it on speaker. "Ms. Reed," the voice said, tinny and frantic. "We see the article. We see the situation escalating. Mr. Thorne would like to offer a solution." I listened. "We are prepared to offer you a settlement, $2 million, and a title, Vice President of Risk. We will issue a joint statement saying the Foresight profile contained inaccuracies regarding your past. You will retract the implication about your brother. You will discredit Ms. Vale's reporting as emotionally motivated." A gasp went through the room. It was a golden cage. Money, status, a corner office. All I had to do was lie. All I had to do was destroy Arden and save Caleb. It was everything I had thought I wanted. Visible. wealthy, safe. I looked at Caleb. He was watching the phone with a look of naked hope. He thought I would take it. He thought everyone had a price. Because he did. I looked at Arden. She wasn't looking at the phone. She was looking at me. She wasn't afraid. She was waiting. I looked at my parents. They were holding their breath, praying for the settlement, praying for the return of the comfortable lie. I stepped away from them. I walked toward the glass doors that led to the terrace. Ms. Reed, the voice on the phone, asked. Do we have a deal? I opened the door and stepped out into the cold night air. The city was spread out before me, a grid of lights and shadows. I took a deep breath. It tasted of rain and freedom. I didn't answer the lawyer. I hung up the phone. I opened the file on my screen. The timeline. It was all there. The dates. The emails. The proof. I looked back through the glass. I saw the party. I saw the people in their expensive clothes, trapped in their expensive lies. I saw Caleb, sweating, terrifyingly ordinary without his myth. I wasn't inside their story anymore. I hovered my thumb over the button marked Send to Editor. I smiled. Send. Thank you for listening to The Structural Integrity of Invisible Systems. This story explores the cost of silence and the power of reclaiming your own narrative. I hope you found Genesis's journey from the shadows to the light as compelling to experience as it was for me to write. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. I am always amazed to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. We have many more tales of justice, resilience, and the complex drama of family dynamics coming soon. Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you have sent the file? Or would you have taken the money? Let's discuss. Until next time, remember the truth is the only system that never fails.